If there's one thing Solomon isn't shy of, it's the ladies. Well, at least those of the demon persuasion. Indeed, Solomon is no stranger to female demons, which is a complete contrast to the beginning of the story, where he is noted as asking Beelzebub if there even were any female demons. By this point, Solomon had encountered Onoskeles, the Seven Sisters, and now, as we're about to find out in today's video, a demon who has no body to speak of, but appears to be merely a floating head. Solomon tells us in the wake of defeating the first of the demon dragons in the last video that, "And I adored the Lord God of Israel, and bade another demon present himself. And there came before me a spirit in woman's form, that had a head without any limbs, and her hair was dishevelled. And I said to her, Who art thou?" Like always, the encounter follows the same formula of Solomon demanding to know who the demon is. The only difference here is the form of this demon, in that it appears to be a woman, but doesn't have a body, but instead a floating head with dishevelled hair. The other more significant difference in this encounter is the cess of the demon. Whilst we've seen some backchat from some of the demons, this demon, like others, attempts to throw Solomon's question back in his face, declaring, "Nay, who art thou? And why dost thou want to hear concerning me?" She isn't the first demon to do this, but she is nonetheless a stern spirit, and one who isn't about to concede to Solomon as quickly as some of the others. She continues, "But as thou wouldest learn, here I stand before thy face. Go then into thy royal storehouses, and wash thy hands. Then sit down afresh before thy tribunal, and ask me questions, and thou shalt learn, O king, who I am." Now you might be thinking, just who in the heck does this princess think she is? Solomon could bind her using the ring at any point he wants, and yet this demoness still has the gall to mouth off to him. Either she's mighty foolish and overestimating her own powers, or she actually is the real deal. Still, she would have likely have known that there was only so far she could push it with Solomon, given that the ring and the word of God would undoubtedly render her bound to Solomon's services regardless, no? Well, turns out there may have been a loophole to the ring after all, as we'll see in a moment. The demon appears to compromise with Solomon by declaring that she will tell him what he wishes to learn, but first he must do something for her. It is she who ends up commanding him, forcing Solomon to work on her terms by getting him to go and wash his hands first. What significance this has to the demon is not known, but it might be said that she believes Solomon was dirty, and therefore would have to cleanse himself before she would even grant him an audience. Through this, there is an implication that the demons view themselves as the righteous, and view man, particularly Solomon, who does God's work, as filthy or otherwise undesirable. Or she might have simply been messing with him and testing to see how far she can push him. In any case, there is an idea here that the signet ring that has bound so many demons thus far doesn't work on this floating head, which is why Solomon is reduced to entertain her compromise. Still, telling him to go and wash his hands before talking to her sure seems like a bizarre request. But then again, maybe this is nothing more than a power play on her behalf. The crazy thing is that Solomon does actually go ahead and wash his hands. He tells us, "And I, Solomon, did as she enjoined me, and restrained myself, because of the wisdom dwelling in me, in order that I might hear of her deeds, and reprehend them, and manifest them to men." Here we gather that he submits to her not because he was necessarily compelled by her, but instead knew that in doing so, it would be far easier than arguing with her. Here, Solomon gives us a very brief lesson in pride, in that sometimes we just have to do the things that we don't want to, because sometimes an argument just isn't worth it. Solomon here promotes healthy compromise and attributes this to his own wisdom, almost like he is too wise to bicker and instead doesn't mind fulfilling a demon's request if it meant gaining the knowledge he seeks. Why doesn't he just use the ring to do this? Well, that kind of gets answered in the next bit. You might also say that perhaps Solomon is trying to show restraint, and maybe prove to himself, his people, and the demons that he doesn't need to use the ring, but can defeat demons by his own accord, by washing his hands in this case. After this, the demon surrenders the flimsy upper hand she had over Solomon and follows suit and reveals her entire backstory. I am called among men Obizuth, and by night I sleep not, but go my rounds over all the world, and visit women in childbirth. And divining the hour, I take my stand, and if I am lucky, I strangle the child. But if not, I retire to another place, for I cannot a single night retire unsuccessful. For I am a fierce spirit, of myriad names and many shapes. And now hither, now thither I roam, and to westering parts I go my rounds. But as it now is, though thou hast sealed me round with the ring of God, thou hast done nothing. I am not standing before thee, and thou wilt not be able to command me, for I have no work, other than the destruction of children, and the making their ears to be deaf, and the working of evil to their eyes, and the binding of their mouths with a bond, and the ruin of their minds, and paining of their bodies. So here we learn that her name is Obizuth, and that she is a nocturnal demon that travels around the world, with the intention of attacking women who are pregnant, more specifically, their children. She declares that she seeks to strangle the child whilst it is still in the womb, showing us that she is no less violent and no less wicked when compared to her demon contemporaries. She also tells us that if she fails in her attempted murder of the child, she is not able to sleep, and can only do so once she has caused a woman to miscarriage. Given that she is just a head, as Solomon describes her, it's hard to imagine how she strangles anyone. But she does reveal to us here that she is able to take on many shapes, and so it would not be so hard to imagine her growing a more capable form and terrorizing those that are pregnant. She also declares that when Solomon seals her with the ring, he will achieve nothing, because even though she is bound, he will not be able to command her, for all she is good for is for harming children, by making them deaf, blind, mute, or otherwise impaired. So this is the loophole that I mentioned earlier when it comes to the ring, and might also explain why Solomon doesn't use the ring from the very get-go, because Obizuth can do nothing else but kill children. She would be ineffective in sawing wood for the temple, for the gathering of marble, or the cutting of stones. So using the ring against her wouldn't be the best use of anyone's time, least of all Solomon's. By this, you might say that there are some demons who are so malevolent and abhorrent that the ring can only affect them so much. In essence, Obizuth is pretty candid with Solomon in that she is not afraid of him, not afraid of the ring, and probably not afraid of his god either. Solomon hears all of this and is amazed, but he also becomes amazed by the demon's form, this floating head. Solomon elaborates a little further here and tells us that the demon actually does possess a body, perhaps one it had grown, given that she is able to take on forms. However, he is quite vague in telling us that her body is shrouded in darkness and that her face was a greeny colour. Her hair was wild like that of a dragon's, and some of her limbs were invisible, again perhaps shrouded in this shadowy darkness that becomes her body. Whilst there are no further descriptions of Obizuth, nor any notable mention of her in many other religious texts, there can be much speculation as to what she really looks like. However, one idea is that Obizuth is actually one of the Gorgons from Greek mythology, one that many may know of as Medusa. We know that the Testament of Solomon has a ton of Greek influence, so it's not so hard to see that this idea has some merit. Given that Obizuth first appears to Solomon as a floating head, it might very well be a callback to the fate of Medusa, whose head is severed by the Greek hero Perseus, and later used by him as a weapon. Whilst Medusa was known for turning men to stone with a glance, Obizuth however declares no such ability, and the similarity between the two characters is then quickly unravelled. Some might say that the wild hair of Obizuth, which Solomon refers to as a wild dragon's, is indicative of the wild hair of Medusa, that which is made of snakes, but this is a bit of a stretch. Solomon proceeds to interrogate Obizuth further and demands to know which angel frustrates her the most, and she tells him, by the angel of God called Apherod. which is interpreted Raphael, by whom I am frustrated now and for all time. His name, if any man know it, and write the same on a woman in childbirth, then I shall not be able to enter her. Of this name the number is 640. Here we learn that this Aphrodite, or more commonly known according to the demon as the Archangel Raphael, is the entity who can counter her. Obizuth reveals that Raphael has and always will preside over her, and that if you were to write his name on a woman during her pregnancy, then Obizuth would not be able to harm the woman or her child. Such is the power that Raphael has over Obizuth, that the mere sight of his name is enough to repel her. Having understood that Obizuth is good for nothing except killing babies, Solomon doesn't even bother trying to bind her with the ring, nor does he try to get her to do any chores around the temple. He simply orders for her hair to be bound and for her to be hanged from the temple, so that when people passed by, they would remember to glorify God, who had given Solomon such power that he could take on the demons by himself. Here Obizuth is punished for her gruesome crimes against humanity, and you might say receives a just punishment for her wickedness. It also shows us a more ruthless side to Solomon, in that when he comes to the conclusion that he cannot affect the demon, he chooses to hang it instead, thus finding it a purpose which suits him in the end. Whether Solomon hangs her because he knows it will help in inspiring worship in his people, or because he still feels salty about being made to abide by Obizuth's terms and wash his hands, is neither here nor there. The biggest takeaway we can get from this tale is that one way or another, Solomon is victorious, and whilst he may not be able to exact his every intention on the demons, those that do not conform are met with a most savage end. As always guys, if you've enjoyed today's video, then don't forget to give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Until next time.